Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The scent of antiseptic and stale coffee was a permanent fixture in the air of ABC General Hospital, a smell Drew Kane had come to associate with both healing and heartbreak. For weeks, he had felt like a ghost in his own life, moving through the brightly lit corridors and hushed patient rooms with a profound sense of dislocation. The memories were there, but they were like photographs in a waterlogged album, images blurred, captions washed away, the context lost to some deep, murky trauma. He remembered the explosion on the docks, the searing heat, the sensation of flying and then nothing but crushing blackness. He remembered waking up in a foreign medical facility, his body a map of pain, his mind a blank slate. The return to Port Charles had been a procession of welcome homes and wary glances. People hugged him, clapped him on the back, but their eyes held a question he couldn't answer. He saw the relief in his daughter Scout's eyes, a pure and simple joy that anchored him. He felt the cautious, steady support from his friends, from Sam, from Elizabeth. But there was a shadow over everything, a narrative everyone seemed to know but him, and the weight of their unspoken knowledge was a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety in his veins. The epicenter of that anxiety, he had come to realize, was Carly. His Carly. The woman whose name was a heartbeat in his history, a constant in the chaotic symphony of his life. She had been his rock, his confidant, his partner in crime for so long. When he'd returned, damaged and disoriented, she had been there, a force of nature steering him through the storm. She'd filled in the blanks, her voice a soothing balm as she narrated the story of his life before the explosion. She'd talked about their plans, their partnership at the Metro Court, their unwavering alliance against the world. She'd held his hand, her touch firm and certain, and in his vulnerability, he had clung to her version of reality like a lifeline. But lately, the lifeline had begun to feel like a leash. It started with small things, inconsistencies so minor he'd chastised himself for noticing. A story she told about a party at the Metro Court that would flicker a vague, discordant image in his mind. The color of her dress was wrong, the music was different. A reference to a conversation they'd supposedly had that drew a complete blank, not the fuzzy blank of forgotten memory, but the stark, empty blank of something that had never happened. He'd mentioned it to her once, his tone light, almost joking. "You sure that was me, Carly? I don't remember being that witty." She had laughed, a bright, tinkling sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Drew, you were on fire that night. It's okay, it'll come back to you. The doctor said it would take time." She was always ready with the doctor's prognosis, a convenient shield against any doubt. And he wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. The alternative, that the person he trusted most was deliberately constructing a false past for him, was too monstrous to contemplate. The real fissure, the one that would eventually crack his manufactured world wide open, began with Nina Reeves. Nina was a specter at his feast. Carly's disdain for her was a palpable, living thing. She spoke of Nina with a venom usually reserved for terrorists and cartel kingpins, painting her as a manipulative, selfish homewrecker who took pleasure in destroying lives. According to Carly, Nina was the source of most of the turmoil in Port Charles, a chaos agent who had targeted their family relentlessly. Drew had no reason to doubt this. His own fragmented memories offered no counter-narrative. But he kept running into Nina, at the hospital visiting a sick employee, at Kelly's picking up a coffee, in the park. And she was never what he expected. She wasn't the cackling villain of Carly's descriptions. She was quiet, often sad, her eyes holding a deep, weary pain. On the few occasions they'd spoken, she'd been polite, almost hesitant, as if waiting for him to hurl one of Carly's accusations at her. One afternoon, he saw her sitting alone on a bench by the lake, staring out at the water with such profound sorrow that he felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Against his better judgment, against every warning Carly had ever issued, he sat down beside her. "Tough day?" he asked. She jumped, startled, and turned to him. For a moment, raw fear flashed in her eyes before it was replaced by a guarded neutrality. "Drew." "Hello." "No, not particularly. Just thinking." They sat in silence for a minute, the only sound the gentle lap of water against the shore. You know, he said, the words coming out before he could stop them, Carly says you're public enemy number one. Nina let out a soft, bitter laugh. I'm sure she does. She says you tried to destroy my family. Nina looked at him then, her gaze direct and unsettlingly clear. I've made mistakes, Drew. Huge, life-altering mistakes. I own that. But my conflict has always been with Carly. Not with you. Never with you. She paused, her brow furrowing. Do you really not remember any of it? The SEC investigation? Nixon Falls? The names meant nothing. SEC, Nixon Falls. They were just words. But the way she said them, with such weight and significance, made his skin prickle. No, he said quietly. I don't. She studied his face, her expression a complex mix of pity and something else, something that looked like guilt. Maybe that's a blessing, she whispered, more to herself than to him. She stood up abruptly. I should go. It was nice talking to you, Drew. He watched her walk away, a slender, lonely figure, and for the first time, a seed of genuine doubt was planted in his mind. Why would she look so guilty? What was in Nixon Falls? When he tentatively brought up the name to Carly later that evening, her reaction was volcanic. Nina? You were talking to Nina? She'd exploded, her face flushing with anger. After everything I've told you about what she's done? She's a snake, Drew. She's manipulating you. She sees you're vulnerable and she's trying to get into your head, to turn you against me. That's what she does. She was so passionate, so convincing. She laid out a detailed history of Nina's transgressions, a litany of betrayals that seemed to confirm her villainy. Drew had backed down, apologizing, telling her she was right, that he wouldn't be so naive again. He held her as she trembled with righteous fury, and he felt like a traitor for having ever doubted her. But the seed was planted, and now it had roots. The name Nixon Falls echoed in the empty chambers of his memory. He started to notice other things. The way Carly would subtly steer conversations away from certain topics or certain people. The way her smile would tighten just a fraction when he asked a question she didn't like. The way she had taken over his life, managing his schedule, his business interests, his relationships, all under the guise of protecting him while he healed. He felt like a puppet, and Carly was holding all the strings, smiling benevolently as she directed his every move. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. It was an unremarkable day, overcast and quiet. Drew was in his home office, trying to familiarize himself with the current state of his and Carly's business holdings. The paperwork was dense, a labyrinth of financial statements and legal documents. He was sifting through a file related to a confidential corporate acquisition from months ago, something Carly had handled while he was away. His head was throbbing, a common occurrence when he pushed his mind too hard. He reached for a bottle of water on his desk and knocked over a small, framed photo of him and Carly. As he picked it up, the backing of the frame, which had always been slightly loose, gave way. The photo slipped out, and behind it, tucked into the frame, was another, smaller piece of paper. It was a receipt. Faded, crumpled, from a diner called the Crimson Light. The location was listed as Nixon Falls. His heart stuttered to a halt. Nixon Falls. The name from the lake. The name that made Nina look guilty and Carly look furious. His hands trembled as he smoothed out the receipt. The date was from during the period he was supposed to be missing, presumed dead. The items were simple, 2 coffees, a Belgian waffle, a side of bacon. But it was the scrawled signature on the bottom that made the blood drain from his face. It wasn't his name. It was Jason. Jason Morgan. The legendary, enigmatic Jason Morgan, Carly's other great love, his own biological brother, who was also presumed dead. Why did he have a receipt signed by Jason from a diner in Nixon Falls? Why was it hidden behind a photo of him and Carly? The throb in his head intensified, becoming a sharp, stabbing pain behind his eyes. Flashes of imagery, disjointed and surreal, assaulted him. The smell of grease and maple syrup. The clatter of a bell on a door. A woman's laugh, not Carly's. A feeling of peace. A simplicity that was utterly alien to his life in Port Charles. He stumbled out of his chair, clutching the receipt like a talisman. He needed answers. He couldn't ask Carly. She would only spin another beautiful, suffocating lie. He thought of Nina, of the guilt in her eyes. She knew. She knew what happened in Nixon Falls. He found her at Crimson Point, the wind whipping her hair around her face as she stared out at the churning gray water of the harbor. She turned as he approached, and this time, the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. "Drew? What is it? What's wrong?" He didn't speak. He just held out the receipt. She took it, her fingers brushing against his, ice cold. She looked down, and her face went ashen. All the blood seemed to leave her body in an instant. She swayed on her feet, and for a moment, he thought she might faint. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice ragged. "It doesn't matter," he said, his own voice low and urgent. "What matters is what it means. Nixon Falls. You mentioned it. Carly forbade me from asking about it. Now I find this, hidden away. Signed by my dead brother. Nina, I need you to tell me the truth. What happened to me in Nixon Falls?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I can't," she choked out. "You don't understand the consequences. The consequences of not knowing or killing me," he exploded, the frustration of weeks, of months, finally breaking free. "I am living in a house of cards built by Carly, and I can feel it collapsing around me. My own mind is a prison, and you have a key. Please. For the sake of whatever we were to each other, whatever happened, please." He saw the war waging within her, the fear, the loyalty to whatever secret she guarded, warring with a fundamental sense of decency. His plea, raw and honest, tipped the scales. "It wasn't just you," she said, her voice so quiet he had to lean in to hear her over the wind. "He was there, too. Jason." She nodded, a single, miserable jerk of her head. "The explosion, it didn't kill him. It sent him to Nixon Falls. With me." And so, there, on the windswept point, with the gulls crying overhead, Nina Reeves began to talk. She painted a picture of a small, forgotten town, a place outside of time. She told him about a man named Mike, a kind, quiet amnesiac with Jason Morgan's face and none of his history. She told him about their life there, a simple, uncomplicated existence. She fell in love with Mike, and Mike, in his innocence, fell in love with her. He was happy, Nina said, the tears streaming down her face freely now. For the first time in his life, he was free from the violence, the pressure, the burden of being Jason Morgan. He was just Mike. And we were happy. Drew listened, his mind reeling, trying to reconcile the image of his ruthless, pragmatic brother with this gentle, amnesiac simpleton. "What does this have to do with me?" he asked, though a terrible suspicion was beginning to dawn in the darkest part of his mind. Nina took a shaky breath. "Carly found out. She discovered he was alive. And she came to Nixon Falls. She saw him with me, and she was furious. She wanted her Jason back. She tried to make him remember, but the more she pushed, the more he resisted. He didn't want to remember. He wanted to stay with me." The story unfolded like a nightmare. Carly, desperate, had enlisted Drew's help. The old Drew, the one with all his memories, the loyal soldier. He had come to Nixon Falls to help his brother, his best friend, remember his life. "You confronted him," Nina said, her voice breaking. "You and Carly, you cornered him. You told him everything about Sonny, about Port Charles, about the life he'd left behind. It was too much, too fast. There was a struggle. At the old ironworks. You and Jason fought. And you fell." The world tilted. Drew's knees felt weak. "I fell." "You hit your head," Nina whispered, her eyes wide with the horror of the memory. "It was a terrible injury. That's what caused the brain damage. That's why your memories are gone. The truth, stark and ugly, landed its first blow. His injury wasn't just from the docks. It was from a fight with his own brother. A fight Carly had instigated. But that's not all, Drew, Nina said, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper, as if she could barely force the next words out. When you fell, you were hospitalized. Carly was frantic. But not just about you. She was terrified that if the truth came out, that Jason was alive and had hurt you, that he would be arrested, sent back to prison, or that Sonny would seek revenge. So, she made a choice. Drew's blood ran cold. What choice? She covered it up, Nina said, the words hanging in the air between them, toxic and irreversible. She had you moved. She told everyone you were found in that foreign facility, that your injuries were from the docks explosion. She erased Nixon Falls. She erased the fight. She erased Jason's part in it. She buried the truth to protect him. She let you come back here, a shell of who you were, and she built this fiction around you, all to keep her precious Jason's secret safe. The world stopped. The sound of the wind, the gulls, the water, it all faded into a high-pitched ringing in Drew's ears. The foundation of his reality, the narrative he had clung to for survival, shattered into a million jagged pieces. It wasn't just lies. It was a betrayal of such monumental proportions that his mind could barely contain it. Carly hadn't just been protecting him in his vulnerability. She had been containing him. She had stolen the truth of his own trauma from him. She had let him wander in the dark, confused and broken, while she held the flashlight, deliberately pointing it away from the wreckage she had helped create. All to protect Jason. Always, always to protect Jason. His injury, the source of all his pain and confusion, was a direct result of her single-minded obsession. And instead of confessing, instead of helping him heal with the truth, she had constructed a gilded cage of false memories and manipulated loyalties. She had made him her project, her pet amnesiac, all while the ghost of Jason Morgan watched from the shadows of her conscience. The image of her face, so full of concern and love, now twisted into something grotesque and manipulative in his mind's eye. Every tender touch, every reassuring word, had been a layer of mortar in the wall she was building around the truth. He felt a nausea so profound he thought he might vomit. The headache was no longer a throb but a screaming, white-hot agony, as if his brain were physically trying to break through the barrier she had helped erect. Drew? Drew, say something, Nina pleaded, her face pale with fear. He couldn't speak. He could only stare at her, his eyes seeing not her, but the horrifying panorama of his own life, laid bare as a lie. He turned away from her, his body moving on autopilot. He stumbled back towards his car, the receipt clutched in his hand, the flimsy piece of paper that had brought down his entire world. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get away. He drove through the streets of Port Charles, the familiar landmarks now seeming like stage props in a play he never agreed to star in. He ended up at the Metro Court, the symbol of his and Carly's partnership. He walked through the glittering lobby, past the guests and staff who nodded respectfully at him, Mr. Kane. The co-owner. The partner. The fool. He went straight to their shared office. Theirs. The word was a mockery. Carly was there, sitting at her desk, talking animatedly on the phone. She looked up as he entered, and a brilliant, practiced smile lit up her face. She held up a finger, 1 minute. He didn't wait. He walked to her desk and stood before her, his posture rigid, his face a mask of stone. Something in his expression must have alerted her. The smile faltered. She quickly ended her call. Drew? Honey, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost. I have, he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the calm in the eye of the hurricane. I've been talking to one of your ghosts, Carly. I've been to Nixon Falls. The color drained from her face so completely it was as if a switch had been flipped. Her carefully constructed composure cracked, and for a fleeting second, he saw raw, unadulterated panic. What? What are you talking about? Did Nina say something to you? That liar! I told you not to listen to her. She stood up, her hands fluttering nervously, trying to reach for him, to touch him, to re-establish her control. He took a step back, evading her touch as if it were acid. Don't, he snarled, the first spark of the inferno to come. Don't you dare try to touch me. Don't you dare try to lie to me again. Drew, please, you have to let me explain. Explain? He interrupted, his voice rising, the calm shattering. Explain what? How you dragged me to that town to help you reclaim your lost love. How you caused the fight that made my own brother, Carly, practically crack my skull open? Or how about you explain the part where you decided that the truth was too inconvenient for you, so you buried it? You buried me. I was protecting you, she cried, her own desperation rising to meet his fury. You were hurt. Telling you that Jason did that to you, it would have destroyed you. It would have destroyed any chance of you two ever having a relationship again. You weren't protecting me, he roared, slamming his fist on her desk, making her jump. You were protecting him. You were always protecting him. You were protecting yourself from having to face what you'd done. You let me come back here thinking I was a victim of some random act of violence, when all along, I was a casualty of your selfish, obsessive love for Jason Morgan. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they ignited no pity in him, only a colder, harder rage. I did it for us, Drew. For our family. For our future. If the truth had come out, everything would have fallen apart. Our future? He let out a harsh, ugly laugh. What future? The one you built on a foundation of lies? The one where you get to play the devoted caregiver while you hide the fact that you're the reason I need care in the first place? You stole my past from me, Carly. You stole the context of my own pain. Do you have any idea what that's like? To look in the mirror and not know the story behind the scars? I did what I had to do, she sobbed. I love you. No, he said, his voice dropping back to that deadly quiet tone. It was more terrifying than his shouting. You don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love the useful, loyal, uncomplicated Drew who would do anything for you. The one who wouldn't question you. The one who wasn't broken. Well, look at me, Carly. I am broken. And you are the one who broke me. Not the explosion. Not fate. You. He looked around the office, at the pictures on the wall, at their shared success. It was all tainted. Every memory, every achievement, was now suspect. This partnership, he said, gesturing around the room. This life you've so carefully curated for us. It's over. Her eyes widened in horror. What? Drew, no. You don't mean that. You're upset, you're not thinking clearly. I am thinking more clearly than I have in months, he said, cutting her off. For the first time since I woke up, the fog is gone. I see you, Carly. I see exactly who you are. You are a woman who will burn down the whole world to keep her secrets safe. You will sacrifice anyone, even me, on the altar of your own self-interest. He turned and walked to the door. Where are you going? She cried, her voice shrill with panic. We can fix this. We can talk about this. He stopped at the threshold and looked back at her one last time. The woman he had trusted with his broken soul. The woman he had believed was his anchor. Now, she was just the wreckage. There's nothing to fix, he said, his voice final and hollow. The truth was the one thing I needed to heal. And you hid it from me. You made my recovery your secret to keep. Well, the secret's out. And so am I. He walked out of the office, leaving her standing there, surrounded by the glittering ruins of the empire she had built on a lie. He walked through the lobby, past the oblivious guests, and out into the afternoon sun. The world looked the same, but it wasn't. It was new, and it was brutal, and it was real. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know what he would do. The road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. But for the first time, he was walking it with his own eyes wide open. The terrible truth was a poison, but it was also an antidote. It had shattered him, but in the breaking, it had set him free. The journey back to himself would be long and painful, but it was a journey he would now take alone, guided only by the cold, hard light of the truth. Drew Cain has faced countless battles since he first arrived in Port Charles, but nothing could have prepared him for the shocking revelation that is about to shake his entire world. For months, the hints were subtle, scattered like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit together, yet Drew never stopped searching for the truth. He had endured brainwashing, memory tampering, betrayals, and heartbreak, but still he pressed forward with the determination of a man who refuses to let lies define his life. Now, the terrible truth that has been lurking in the shadows is finally exposed, and the weight of it threatens to destroy the fragile sense of peace he has fought so hard to build. In true General Hospital fashion, what begins as an innocent discovery soon spirals into a life-altering revelation that no one could have seen coming, least of all Drew himself. The foundation of Drew's struggle has always been identity. From the moment he learned he was Jason Morgan's twin, every part of his existence became a series of questions. Who was he really? Where did he belong? Was he a man defined by his memories or by his choices? The answers often eluded him, as forces far more sinister manipulated his mind and altered his reality. Now, with the truth breaking through the cracks, Drew realizes that his entire journey has been leading to this moment. It isn't just about his past anymore, it's about the devastating consequences that the truth will unleash on the people he loves. Drew's protective nature, especially toward those he considers family, makes this revelation all the more painful, because the fallout will not stop with him. Secrets of this magnitude always spread like wildfire in Port Charles, leaving devastation in their wake. The terrible truth begins with whispers that Drew initially dismisses as paranoia. There had been strange inconsistencies in the stories people told him, moments when conversations ended abruptly the moment he entered a room, and documents that didn't match up with what he thought he knew about his life. For a man who has survived manipulation at the hands of Shiloh and Helena Cassadine, Drew's instincts were sharper than most, yet even he hesitated to believe what his gut was telling him. The thought of being betrayed once more was too painful, and he wanted desperately to believe that his days of being a pawn in someone else's game were behind him. Still, he could not ignore the signs, and when he finally started connecting the dots, the picture that formed was darker than anything he had imagined. The truth was not simply about Drew's past, but about the present reality of those around him. He discovered that someone close to him, someone he had trusted implicitly, had been keeping a secret so dangerous it could unravel lives. At first, Drew thought it was a matter of personal betrayal, lies told to protect another person's reputation or to keep painful information buried. But as he dug deeper, the scope widened. This was not just a lie of omission. It was a deliberate conspiracy, woven carefully over years, involving power, manipulation, and a willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for personal gain. The terrible truth wasn't just about Drew's stolen years or the memories forced upon him, it was about the lengths to which others had gone to control him, and the lingering ripple effect that still threatened the people he loved. When the full realization hit, Drew felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. He had fought so hard to reclaim his life after being imprisoned overseas and subjected to mind control experiments, only to find that the ghosts of those traumas had never truly been vanquished. The people behind his suffering had not only stolen his identity, they had embedded lies so deeply into his history that even now, years later, he was still uncovering the damage. To Drew, the most painful part was recognizing that the people who should have protected him had either turned a blind eye or actively participated in the deception. Trust, once shattered, is almost impossible to rebuild, and Drew now faced the agonizing question of who in his life was truly on his side. The fallout began almost immediately. Relationships that Drew had painstakingly rebuilt after returning to Port Charles started to crack under the pressure of the truth. Friends who once stood firmly in his corner found themselves caught in the crossfire of divided loyalties, unsure whether to support Drew or to defend the people implicated in the conspiracy. Family members were torn apart, old wounds resurfaced, and the already fragile dynamics within Port Charles grew even more volatile. For Drew, it became not only a personal battle but a moral one. Should he expose everything, no matter the cost, or should he protect those he loved by keeping the truth hidden? The weight of such a choice gnawed at him, for Drew's sense of justice demanded honesty, yet his heart ached at the thought of causing more pain. Adding to the turmoil was the growing suspicion that the truth extended far beyond what Drew had uncovered. Each answer only seemed to open more questions, suggesting that this terrible revelation was just the beginning of a much larger nightmare. Drew's instincts told him that powerful forces were still at play, pulling strings behind the scenes, and that his discovery had only scratched the surface of a grander scheme. The Cassidines, with their history of manipulation and control, loomed large in his thoughts, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone else entirely might be orchestrating the chaos. The more he uncovered, the more dangerous it became, and Drew quickly realized that exposing the truth would put a target on his back once again. What made the revelation truly devastating was the emotional toll it exacted. Drew is not a man who easily allows himself to be vulnerable, but this time he could not hide the pain. The betrayal cut too deeply, and the implications reached too far. He found himself questioning every memory, every relationship, every promise made to him since his return. Could he ever truly trust anyone again? Could he even trust himself, knowing how easily his mind and life had been manipulated in the past? These questions haunted him, threatening to consume the stability he had fought so hard to regain. In the end, Drew understood that he had no choice but to confront the truth head-on, no matter how much it hurt. For only by facing it could he hope to reclaim his life once and for all. The revelation hit him like a freight train. He was Subject 17. His memories, his identity, everything he thought he knew about himself was a lie. The experiments hadn't just targeted his uncle, they'd targeted him, too. He didn't know who he was anymore, or what had been done to him. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to stop until he uncovered every last secret. With Sam by his side, Drew prepared to confront the masterminds behind Project Nexus. They tracked down a lead to an old Cassidine estate, a sprawling mansion on the edge of town. It was said to be abandoned, but as they approached, they saw lights flickering in the windows. Someone was there.